Hello, everybody. This is Vince and Sherry with Pastor Life. Today, we come with you with our 5th video from lessons we've learned from the 7 churches we've pastored. And up to this point, we talked about the first church we pastored in college. Honey, anything about that church that speaks out to you?
Well, it was special to us because it was during the period of time that we were dating, and every Sunday we were going up kind of near where your family was from and pastoring that church. And we weren't married yet, but I was teaching Sunday school there, and it was a wonderful experience to have for our first church, even before we ever married.
Wonderful. And then we went to seminary from college, and we pastored a church in seminary. Anything that sticks out to your mind about that second church?
They were a loving and sweet church. They were a small congregation, but they were loving. Their demands were very low, and their kindness was very high.
Okay, very good. And then the church that we pastored after seminary, and we were told at seminary, consider your first church after seminary kind of like an extension of school. And that was the way we kind of looked at it. We learned a lot. Anything about that third church?
Well, at that church, we had a small child and another one that was on the way. And we learned that sometimes there are differences in maybe the way that you were raised or your expectations. And then the place where you go, there can be a little bit of a divide there, maybe even spiritually or with your belief system, there can be a difference. And we needed to do a better job of maybe hammering those things out
Amen.
during the initial stages. But we are very thankful God gave us the opportunity to pastor there.
Okay. And then we went to our 4th church. It was the church that we stayed at that time, the longest tenure, and the longest tenure in the history of that church. And again, that was in the mountains of western North Carolina. Anything about that church?
Yes, I think that was a place where we felt very much at home, and we were both able to have friends in that church, which is something that really didn't happen probably before or has not really happened since to that degree. Having people in our home and just being a big part of our life during those years in our 20s.
Now, one of the things that we wanted to do at that church was to own our own home. We'd lived in parsonages, and we just felt compelled to be able to have our own home and to feel like you're in some sort of control. With the thing about parsonage living, yeah, the house might be free, but at any given time, the church can say, folks, it's been wonderful, but you've got 30 days. And I didn't want my housing to be connected that much to where we worked. We had an opportunity to build a home where we were at, but we just didn't think the Lord was in it. And then the 5th church appeared.
Right.
And the 5th church did something for us. What did they do?
Well, they, when we were getting ready to talk to them more seriously, they mentioned that they did not have a parsonage at their church, and that because they did not, they felt compelled to offer us an opportunity to help us to be able to get into our own home. And they offered us an interest-free loan for our down payment. And they put us in contact with a bank that would allow that. And we were able to find a home that we liked very much. Well, we loved it. Mm-hmm. And we were able to actually get into a home there as we had dreamed of doing. And we started immediately paying back the down payment loan that the church had given us. It was interest-free, but we didn't want to delay. They told us we could pay it back whenever we got ready. Maybe years down the road, if we sold our home, we could pay it back to them then. But we said, no, we really want to start paying that loan back now, and we did.
Well, I think it was a great opportunity for us.
Yes.
And it was a great insight on the behalf of the church. They did not have that accommodation. Remember, this is back in the 90s, and a lot of churches had parsonages, but they wanted to overcompensate and give us that down payment for our interest-free loan for that down payment. Now, one of the things we did, and as they were talking about learning at different churches, when you're dealing with churches and churches, when you're dealing with pastors, it's great to put this stuff down in writing.
Yes.
And not that you don't trust them or they don't trust you, but sometimes your memory might be able to slip a little bit on you. And it's good to put all this stuff down. And when they were talking to us about the loan, they said, just pay it back whenever. And I said, no, I'd rather have a thing drawn up, for the lack of a better term, a contract. And this is what we will pay every month to the completion of the loan. And that's exactly what we did. So that's one of the things that we learn when you're talking to churches. Make sure you know their expectations and make sure that they know your expectations. And sometimes the best way to do that is to write things down.
Right.
Now, one of the things that we learned that we knew about before we went to this church is they had been in some difficulty. That they had been in a situation where the pastor was left and the church had split. And I had never personally ever experienced anything like that. And I think Sherry and I talked about it, and we'd come from some kind of a comfortable situation, and I thought this would not be a problem. They had been separated, whatever, for about 18 months. And I thought that's plenty enough time to get over it, and we're just going to go down there and tear it up. Now, Sherry and I have discussed
tear it up in a bad way.
not in a bad way. It's already tore up. No, tear it up in a good way.
Yeah. Get it going. Get it going in the right direction.
Yeah, not tear it up. But I think we've discussed this. The types of churches. There's probably 10 types of churches, but for the sake of this time together, we've picked like 3 kind of churches that are kind of typical. The first one is that the healthy church, and that's the church that has the greatest opportunity to grow because there's not really any landmines anywhere. You know, people are wanting to come to a church that's healthy, and people are speaking good about it, and it's just a wonderful time, don't you think?
That's right. That's right. And the second type of church we talked about was a church that we might call a maturing church or a maintenance type of church, where maybe they live in a town that's not growing very much. They're not getting a lot of new people coming in. Matter of fact, maybe their children or grandchildren have grown up and moved away to cities and places where there's not a lot of industry there. And your job as a pastor is to go in and to minister to those people, to pray for them, love them, help them in their needs, and just to see them mature in Christ. There may not be an explosive growth,
Right.
but you are still able, I hate to say maintain, that doesn't sound good, but you are. You're ministering to people and helping them to keep their church together. And they might see some growth, but
Sure.
that might not be your primary role, is to be like a growing kind of pastor.
Well, that third church is the kind of the church that we went to, and that was a church that was sick or an unhealthy church, where they had experienced a traumatic issue. Their pastor was asked to leave, and then on top of that, he took about half of the congregation with him, and it was a terrible thing. It took place in a community, in a town. So everywhere you would go in that town, and if you told them where you pastored, they'd say, that's the church that split. So everybody knew about your situation, your business. Even if you didn't know them, they knew about you. And that's where we were. And I thought, we can help this situation. And I come to find out something, we really couldn't.
We did our best to.
Yes.
And one of the things we discovered is that when this pastor left, the majority of the people that he took were the younger members and their young children. And this devastated the members that were left behind. They were hurt by this so much because they loved those people that left. They loved their children. They wanted to see those children grow up in the church. That had been their past tradition, and they wanted that to continue. And when this happened, the pastor that left the church actually created a mission type church in the same town. And so this created a big issue, because the people that had been attending just needed to drive a little further, and they could go to the church where the previous pastor was preaching every Sunday and delivering sermons and creating this mission. And this was very hurtful, and I can see that it would be very hurtful to those left behind.
Well, yeah, and I can't speak to those that left.
That's right.
But I can speak to those that were left behind. And it was like a train wreck, where a train has come derailed and you're coming on the scene and everybody's getting out of the train. Some of them look normal, but they're all affected. So when a church split happens, everybody is affected. Don't think that somebody says, well, I heard about it, but it did. People would tell me that, and then we would get in a private conversation, and it would go back to that split, or maybe months before the split. And they said, well, we knew something was going to happen. Some people had no idea it was going to happen, but everybody was affected. So I had to learn how to listen in hopes of them getting somewhere beyond it. Didn't know how long it was going to take. I remember feeling so overwhelmed, just like you say, a train had unraveled, and you're trying to help everybody, and you're overwhelmed. And I called a state convention leader, and I explained what had happened, and I wanted to know how to help, and when would we start to heal? When would we get over it, I think was the term. And he said, well, liken it to your family. If your wife passed away in an accident, how long would it take for you to get over it? And I thought about it on the phone. And I said, well, I don't think I'd ever get over it. I guess I just have to learn to live with it. And the man said, exactly. anytime something like this happens, it's like losing a loved one that you were not expecting to pass away. And you're having to go on with your life without somebody that you thought was going to be in your life. So it was a extremely challenging time. We did the very best we could. We tried to get young people involved, tried to bring a spirit of stability, and I think we stayed there way longer than the average for following in that kind of situation.
And I do think that one of the things that happens when there is a split in a church is those who are left behind not only are wondering what in the world went wrong, what could we have done differently, but they also feel a great sense of distrust for new people that might come in, and distrust maybe even for their pastor, even though they might love him, and deep inside they might know that he loves them. If anything out of the ordinary happens, they immediately accuse someone of something or get upset because they've been hurt, they've been damaged. And that takes a long time for a church to get over.
I remember, and it's nothing bad, it's just how they, I guess, processed it. I had a son that was in like middle school, and I would drop him off at middle school, and I would go on into work. Now, my generation, when you pastored the church, you went to the church. You actually went
to
there.
the office,
You
right?
went to the office. Now, whether you stayed 8 hours or not, I don't know, but you would go to work. And I remember getting there around 8 o'clock, even getting there before the secretary, and the phone would be ringing. So you'd take the key out of the lock and run to the phone, and you'd say the name of the church, and the person would hang up. And you're thinking, wow, guy dialed the wrong number. Didn't think much of it. And this happened, I don't know, several times. I'd come in, the phone would be ringing, I would pick it up, and they'd hang up. I'd tell them who it was, they'd hang up. And after maybe the 5th or 6th time of this happening over the course of a month, I realized this was not a wrong number. So the next time they called, I hit *69. That's where you could get the previous number that had called. And whoever it was, had blocked the ability for their number to be followed. And I realized, I believe, it was probably a church member. I think they loved us. They just wanted to make sure you were at work because the last pastor, they didn't think did. So that was that level of distrust that just takes time. So if you're in a situation like that as a pastor, don't panic. Those things are kind of normal. You just show your love and mercy.
The best you can.
The best you can. And, I think when you're younger, you think you might have all the answers, and the churches are looking for pastors that can turn things around. If we get the right man, this church will grow. And if he has a silver bullet, then we know we're going to grow because he's got all the answers. We're going to listen to everything he says.
And if his wife is pretty and perfect,
Amen.
that
if
might
she
be
can
like,
play the piano and
sing, solos, and
yes.
lead Bible school, and all these things. And his kids if they're perfect, then we're really gonna be great.
And it's never that way.
No, and it's that way for pastors sometimes
Sure.
too. They think if I went to the right church that
Yes.
loved me, that was good to me, that was in the right kind of town, that was ready to do this or that or the other, then it would be super. I would be a successful pastor.
Yeah, they call them plum churches. They said, well, if I could get a plum church. And what that means is plumb terrible, but they're thinking, if I get that perfect church with a perfect deacon.
So that goes both ways.
Yeah, it swings both ways.
It does.
But just on the humor side, that's the way it works.
That's right.
But in reality,
Right.
you're dealing with real people with
and you're real.
issues. You're
yeah,
real.
That's right.
And you're wanting to show the love of Christ. Mm-hmm. It may not be what you wanted. Nobody wants to go to an unhealthy church. Nobody wants to go to but that's what we're called to do. And remember, we are under shepherds. If you think that church is mistreating you or not doing you right, they will answer to the Lord. And listen, if you're lazy and you don't work, you'll answer to the Lord. So we're all accountable to Him. And I think one of the best, questions I asked while I was there, over the course of the years up to that point, we had some ups and downs in churches. A lot of the times I was in the middle of it or knew about the situation. Here was a situation that I was dealing with that I had nothing to do with it,
Yes.
and it was traumatic. I mean, I can't tell you how traumatic it was. I would not wish it on my worst. If I had an enemy, I wouldn't wish it on them. It was a terrible.
It almost made you physically sick to show a lot of stress.
Yes, and I would pray, Lord, why did you send me to a place that has these needs that I really cannot help? And I never got a clear-cut answer, but I felt the impression was, look at this. Never be a part of this. If you're a pastor, do whatever it takes before that happens.
Prevent this.
Yeah,
from
prevent
happening.
this just about at all costs. And that stayed in my mind. I've never been in a position where I even thought in those terms. But I hope I would never be in a position. And I'm sure the people that left were justified in leaving, and the people that stayed were probably justified in what they said. But it was a terrible thing. Now, I was there. A couple of other pastors came through behind me, and then they merged with another church. And now they're one of the most dynamic body of believers in the community where they serve.
That's right.
So I hope that maybe the tough time I was there and just tried to hold things together made that happen to the next guy and the next guy. And then God had this great plan to bring these people in this church and really serve the community. So I am excited to see what is going on in that church right now. They went from, probably healthy to probably caretaker role to being unhealthy and just kind of surviving. And then all of a sudden, years passed and God turned it around.
And I guess you can see in this, you think, God, why did I have to be in the stage where everything was so traumatic and the train wreck had just happened? Everybody was hurting and suspicious of everyone else. And I was caught in the middle of that. Why couldn't I have come along 2 or 3 pastorates later and been part of it when the church really turned around and exploded and did so great? And so I think this is an important lesson that we learned also, is that God sometimes calls you to those growing churches, but there's many times he calls you to churches maybe where you feel uncomfortable, out of your element. You're like, Lord, why did you do this to me? Why am I here? But he is using you there more than you realize. Mm-hmm. And he is also teaching you while you are there. Yeah. And so your role is not always to be what we might call huge, dynamic, or successful in the eyes of how some people might see churches, but your responsibility is to be faithful to Christ in whatever situation he's put you in, because he will use you for his glory in some way.
Yeah, you may not always get roses. So
that's right. That's
might
right.
be rocks. I don't know. But the goal is to be faithful to Jesus.
Right.
He is the head of the church, and you keep reminding yourself, this is not my congregation. This belongs to the Lord. And if he puts me in a position, he has a reason to do it. And I want to serve him, and I want to be found faithful, and I want to learn through that how to be a better, spouse, try to be a better father. So you concentrate on those things that you feel you have some level of control.
That's right. And I will add this to just as kind of like the little rose on top of the thorns, okay, is that now that this church is explosive and dynamic and doing incredible things, one of our daughters, sons-in-law, and their children attend that church. Start right at the beginning when they kind of merged in, they moved to the area and started attending that church, and they're actively involved, and we've seen them grow and develop in that church that we once thought, is this church going to make it, Lord? Are we going to make it? Is this going to, work out? And it just goes to show you that God has a plan, and he might even pull your family back into that plan later on, and you didn't anticipate or see that. And so your part might feel hard right now and difficult where you're serving, but in the end, you never know how God is going to bring that back around into your life.
And you got to remember, no matter how difficult it is, it belongs to Jesus.
Amen.
So I've heard people say that church needs to close, or this needs to happen, or whatever. It's not yours. I don't care how much training, all that stuff. It's up to the Lord. The Lord can take, if he can make bones come back to life,
Amen,
like he did in Ezekiel,
that's
he
right,
can do it to a church.
Yes.
It's just God's will. We just have to be found faithful doing what he's called us to do, like a good steward. Right. We're going to, whatever he's given us gift-wise, we're going to use it. We may not be able to double that gift, but we might be able to increase it. We're certainly not going to do any good by burying it and just waiting for him to return. So wherever you find yourself, if you're a church member and a church is struggling, pray for that pastor. Say encouraging things to him. Don't think things are going to turn around in a bat of an eye. It could happen, but most of the time it is a growth through time, and God blesses that.
And recently we were digging through a wooden trunk that we have where we keep a lot of little keepsakes from our past years. And I pulled out a little small piece of paper that was wrapped up in a little letter. And when we unwrapped that or took the envelope out, My husband had received, and we had forgotten about it, one of the sweetest letters that you've ever received when we left that church, of someone telling you what a blessing you had been to them while you had been there, and how God had truly used you in their church, and he didn't want you to think that he hadn't, that he wanted you to know that God had used you in a special way. And as we were reading that note, it just brought a smile to my face.
Yeah, it was encouraging because when you're a pastor, it's like it's a spiritual battle, and you're taking like a street at a time, like hand-to-hand combat. So you forget if you've done something good. You don't dwell on that. You go to the next thing, and when you finish that, you go to the next thing. And so sometimes people would say, "You did this for us or for my family," and it's not that I didn't care. I cared very much. It's just that I didn't keep it in my mind because I had to go to the next.
The next battle was right there.
Yeah, it's waiting
right,
on me.
Yeah.
So it is a blessing to get those notes. And
Yes,
that kind
it
of
is.
thing. Well, we loved that fifth church. It gave us an opportunity that no other church had done up to that point, and I'm grateful to see it doing well now and thriving and proclaiming in the name of Jesus. And our next video on this will be our sixth church that we left this church and went to, and then finally our seventh church where we have been and retiring from after 22 years. So we're going to finish up on that.
And I will say that you want to be back for our next church, because we often call the next church our reward. And so you don't want to miss that
That's
one.
right. If you haven't subscribed, we ask that you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And honey, how can they look at the other 4 videos?
Well, you can go to Pastor Life YouTube. I haven't been linking all the videos since there's several of them, but if you go to the Pastor Life channel, then you will be able to see that our previous videos there are listed out, and we put the numbers in them, first, second, third, so you can check up on the videos that we have already done.
Okay. Well, we hope you guys have a great week. God bless and take care.
Bye-bye.